So like Elizabeth said, I'm Nicole, and I'm here today to talk about what I consider one of the most incredible human rights issues of our time, child sex trafficking, a form of modern-day slavery. I'll start by telling you just a little bit about my family and our background. My husband Tom and I have been married for 20 years. We have 4 children and 3 grandchildren. 3 years ago, our youngest was 15. It was her freshman year of high school. Her grades were fine, and she was doing incredible in sports. She played the violin. You know, now things weren't perfect, like in every household. Her older brother had gone off to college, and there were other changes at home and at school affecting her, which seemed to us to produce the normal teenage drama. Nothing we couldn't handle as a family. But then our world turned upside down. She was gone. She had run away from home, left a note with a friend. It didn't explain much. It said that she loved us, but she needed to go find herself. So we reported her missing, and of course we started hunting for clues. We turned her room upside down, and under her mattress we found a report card, and she'd written on it, "Sorry to disappoint you, Dad." She'd gotten a D. I can't tell you what those words did to Tom, but he took care of me because he could tell I was terrified. He says, "Look, she's thinking like a child. She'll come home in a few days, and we'll be so happy to see her that all will be forgiven. You'll see she's hiding with a friend." I could see that he was just as worried as I was. 10 days later, we got a call. She'd gone up to a police officer and reported that she was a runaway. She was still in the patrol car, and I raced to meet them. When I got there, I could see the physical changes. Her hair was cut and colored. Her nails were done. She had new clothes. She didn't look like herself. And all I could think was, get her home. But then, on the drive back, I couldn't believe what she started telling me. My baby had been held captive. She'd been raped, and she'd been sold for sex. And I thought, this is something that happens here in our own backyard? You know, you hear the stories about overseas, but not here. Sorry. So we got her home, and we took her to the hospital. And at the hospital, they examined her, and that was pretty much it. Gave us some pamphlets and sent us on our way. I called the local detective that was handling her missing persons case, and he wanted to talk to her, but she didn't want to talk to anyone. And he just never called back. I'd like to tell you that according to the Department of Justice, human trafficking is the second fastest growing criminal enterprise. And currently there are as many as 300,000 children in the US alone that could fall victim to this. And the range of victims cross all social and economic boundaries. Well, after we got her home, and she didn't want to talk to anyone, we decided, okay, she needs to feel safe. We'll just wipe this under the rug and do the best we can to survive, give her back her normal life. But that was a mistake. We were on our own, we didn't know. 3 months later, we were watching the news, and I looked over at my husband, and there was a report of a missing 7-year-old on that news, and we were both crying. So grateful that our daughter was home, and such compassion for that family. That was a fleeting feeling, however, because within an hour, we would realize that she was gone again. There was no note this time. She had just neatly stacked her school books on her bed, and on top, she placed the cross that she'd been wearing since the day she returned. She'd been lured away this time by a girl that she had met out on the streets, and soon she ended up in the hands of a very evil man. Within 36 hours, he had posted an advertisement for my daughter on a website called Backpage.com. We'd find out later, but for 47 days, there was no word. I remember I used to get up suddenly, and I'd start searching the closets. I was convinced I would just find her hiding somewhere. There was this crazy hope. Tom has since told me that he did the same thing, but for 47 days there was no word. It's an endless nightmare. The sun comes up each day as if nothing is wrong, and you wonder why the world hasn't stopped. On day 47, she called me to wish me a happy birthday. I pleaded with her to come home, and over again she said she couldn't. And then she hung up. Meanwhile, Tom was going out nights, looking places I didn't want to think about, handing flyers to anyone that would listen. And then he'd come home and he'd start checking the websites, places they put children up for sale. There's hundreds of them online right now. Let me tell you just a little bit about Backpage. 3 years ago when this happened to my daughter, they were making $17 million a year off their escort services. At about the same time, Craigslist shut down their escort services, and now Backpage's profits have shot up to about $38 million. This is the website where my 15-year-old daughter was sold as the weekend special. And thousands of others are sold each year. And they've been asked by every attorney general in the United States, clergy from around the US, our local elected officials, and many others to stop the sale of children. And each time their response is the same. We're protected under a federal law, and we do self-screening to protect children. I'm here to tell you that if one child is sold, it is one too many. After 108 days, my daughter was arrested, along with the man that had been selling her. And she was so angry at everyone except for him. And I knew right away we were going to need professional help. You see, the child that leaves isn't the child you get back. And we'd already made this mistake once, and we weren't going to make it again. But help found us. Noelle from the Bridge program at Youth Care was there. She met with our daughter in juvie, and she has been there ever since. There was going to be a trial, and she was going to have to testify. And with lots of counseling and help from what I call her posse, a vice detective, a prosecutor, Noelle, and the love and support of her family, she slowly started to get used to the idea. Now let me tell you a little bit about why it's so important to have trained first responders. Not too long ago, my husband and I were talking to a lieutenant of a police office here in the local area where she had been held for 6 hours on suspicion of prostitution. But they couldn't prove her identity, and they let her go, right back into the hands of the pimp that had her. And when we confronted him about this and we're asking, the lieutenant looks at us and goes, well, these girls lie. Big boobs and a pretty face. We didn't know. This is why it's so important that our first responders are trained, so that they can tell the signs of what a victim looks like. Because my daughter was beaten, and she was coerced, and she was lied to. You see, everything was different this time because we did have those professionals, and they cared. The vice detective I talked about, he calls my daughter to this day to make sure she's doing okay 3 years later. He calls my family, and he's a support. And when it came time for her to testify, man, was she strong, stronger than I was. And I'm happy to report that this man was convicted and sentenced to 26.5 years. Meanwhile, in the Bridge program, she was able to be with girls that had experienced what she had. She wasn't alone. The staff didn't judge or pity her. They didn't treat her as damaged. And I watched this happen in the care of these good people. My daughter came back. I'd like you to know that there are about 150 beds across the U.S. that specialize in the care of these victims, and that just isn't enough. In the last 3 years, I'd like to say that the Seattle area has become a fighter on the forefront of this issue. Mayor Mike McGinn has formed a coalition of mayors. The Attorney General's office under Rob McKenna formed the Pillars of Hope, and the Washington state legislation has passed several laws that enhance sentences and protect these victims. We're fortunate in this area to have several different organizations that help support these victims and their families. I've mentioned the Bridge program at Youth Care. I mentioned Noelle, who now runs OPS. It's for survivors. And Stolen Youth provides money to these services for wraparound care for the families and the children of these victims. We need to work together to change the law that protects this website. It's Section 230 of the Immunities Communication Decency Act. Congress passed this statute in order to protect websites from third-party postings. However, I feel that some courts have misinterpreted it to give immunity to Backpage so that pimps can promote their prostitutes, even their underage prostitutes, on a massive scale. My hope here today is to change your perspective. If this can happen to my family, it could happen to yours. These children need a voice, and you have to be it. We need to work together to support these victims and to make sure that there's not one more child sold. Thank you.